Okay. So, welcome everyone to the 12-step Big Book Workshop. My name is Lisa, and I am a student. I'm a long-term student of the 12 Steps Method of Recovery. My fellowships have been, let's see, Alateen, Al-Anon, CODA, OA. Um, I've gone to NA. I have a very wide variety. As a reminder, please remember to raise your virtual hand to speak. We all get excited and we forget, and that's okay, but try to remember. It just keeps things flowing on a better level. And also, please remember what you see here and what you hear here needs to remain here. It's the confidentiality that we seek. So join me in prayer for a new experience as we set aside and let go of our false ideas and we open our minds to our higher power that guides us throughout our day. Please try to implement this prayer into your daily prayer work and edit the prayer as you see fit or how you need it. But really try to put this prayer into your life and have it work. So please join me. God, please set
God,
aside everything
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 I
I think
think
that
I
I
I
know
know
know about
about
myself,
myself,
my
I
will,
am
my need to be in control,
I need
and
to be in
you
control.
as my power for a new experience with myself, my lack of
lack
faith
of faith, and
in.
especially you.
Thank you, everyone. So we're on step one. It talks a lot about self-will run riot. And if you were here last week, we did have a student that was sharing that she was struggling with a serious issue within her family. And she was trying to express a lot of what was going on and became pretty upset and dismayed, and didn't think that I was understanding her ever. But I'm bringing it up because it was a fantastic moment for all of us to see unmanageability in action. It was doing quite a number of engaging her into her victimhood and how everything in her life was someone else's fault. And we got to see it firsthand. Her self-will was running riot. I mean, it had her tooth and nail dragging her across the world, it seemed like. Um, so I thought it was worth pointing out that to be able to watch somebody go through the self-will run riot, it was very special. I appreciate that she shared. I don't appreciate that she was having such difficulty, but I do appreciate that we were able to see it and maybe learn something from it. On page 62, Bill says, we are driven by 100 forms of fear that stoke the flames of self-will run riot. And in order to avoid our fears, we try manipulating situations to better suit our needs. Instead of letting the events be what they are, we manipulate them to be what we want them to be. Yet, that need to control and manage our addictions or people in situations is very exhausting and pretty much a fruitless venture. Recovery is a lifetime journey, and battling self-will run riot is a never-ending endeavor. When we recognize that our self-will has run riot, we can stop, we turn, and we do step three again and again and again. And that allows us to relinquish our need for control, and we give that need for the control over to our higher power. So when we find ourself will running us ragged, the third step prayer is extremely helpful. I know it comes later, but it right now is a good time to remind us that that prayer is really helpful. And addiction is a multifaceted condition. It significantly affects both our body and our mind, creating a cycle of cause and effect. And this interrelationship emphasizes the necessity of a holistic treatment approach for lasting recovery. In the world of addiction, the body and mind function within a continuous feedback loop. The use of substances physically modifies the brain chemistry and the nervous system, which subsequently influences psychological cravings and emotional reactions. On the flip side, mental conditions such as stress or trauma can invoke powerful physical urges to engage in substance use also. So it's critical to understand that addiction is not merely a result of weak willpower or bad choices. Rather, it's a chronic progressive disease that disrupts the mind, body, spirit connection. It affects our whole being. And the substances that we use can also alter our brain chemistry and rewire the reward system so that changes our decision-making process, and it illustrates the inseparable bond between the body and the mind. So, I did say substance use alters brain chemistry, but I can also say, now that I said it and I wanted to think about it, um, it can also affect process addictions, which any issue you have codependent wise or Al-Anon wise would be considered um, a process addiction. And I know for myself, when I get into the process addiction of people, I can get a pretty good punch that sometimes I need as a addiction. So I am going to change that a little bit. It's not just substances that alters the brain. The brain is also altered by process addictions. The lights all go off when we do the thing that we think we love. So here we are in step one. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Great big dash that our lives had become unmanageable. So Bill is inviting us to undertake the steps to an inevitable spiritual awakening. That's what this is all about. It's why he wrote the 12 steps. We admitted we were powerless over, and you insert your addiction or your issue in there. Don't worry about the word alcohol unless that's your addiction. Put any word in there. Bill was not thinking 100 years ahead in realizing how many addictions would be using his 12 steps. But that doesn't mean we can't adjust it. So just whatever your addiction is, whenever you read it, put your addiction in there, or just put the word addiction. You can use that. So we've looked at the body and the opinion of Dr. Silkwood. He's the medical doctor that practiced at the town's hospital. And he explained that alcoholism is a twofold illness, a body problem, meaning a physical allergy where ingesting alcohol triggers an uncomfortable craving, and the mind problem, which is a mental obsession that drives the person to take that first drink. And Dr. Silkworth believed that the alcoholic's body reacts to alcohol differently than an average person's would. Once the substance enters the system, it triggers an abnormal, uncontrollable physical craving. Because of this allergy, the person can never safely use their addiction again. The time is past. And have you ever felt like you lost control after you've started using your particular addiction? Once control slips away, everything that follows becomes either a prelude or a recounting of the past. All your thoughts, feelings, and comments are merely setup or narrative. Bill would describe this challenge as a mental struggle, and many of us have likely wondered why we begin again after a period of abstinence. In the book, as Bill sees it, there's a section called Face the Music, and he writes, "Don't be too disheartened by that slip. We, as individuals who struggle with alcohol, often learn through difficult experiences. The idea of moving on to a different place might seem appealing, but it could also lead to more new issues. You might find yourself in an emotional or financial situation that's hard to manage where you are. Yet, maybe you're doing what many of us have done at some point, running away. Why not take a moment to reconsider this? Are you truly prioritizing your recovery? Or are you making it dependent on other people, places, or situations? You may discover that it's more beneficial to confront your challenges right where you are and with the support of your program, your fellowship. Find a way to succeed. Before making a decision, consider it carefully." And Bill wrote that letter in 1949 to kind of help people realize that this process that we're going through that we feel like we're failing at, we're not. This is normal, our new normal. So unmanageability is right there in the first step. And you can see that the dash is not an and. If you put an and in there, it would have been connecting unmanageability to the addiction. But Bill put a dash there because, as we have learned, they're not connected. Bill used a dash instead of a simple comma or the word and as a tool of continuation. It separates physical powerlessness, which is the ability to stop drinking once you start, from emotional unmanageability, which is the chaos and unmanageability of living life, even when sober. And it shows that the two clauses are interdependent. At first, I considered the second part, the unmanageable, to mean I have to go to rehab, I might get fired, I might lose friends, etc. And it actually does, but it means so much more than that. And however vastly more prevalent is the word powerlessness in the first part, which had caused my life to become unmanageable long before the addictions kicked in. My real powerlessness was that when I started overeating, let's say, I could not stop. If there was a chocolate cake sitting on the counter, I would eat it slowly, one bite at a time, because one bite's not going to hurt me. One bite at a time until the entire cake is gone. Now, I don't mean I stood at the counter and did that because then somebody might notice I'm doing it. What I mean is, for as long as that cake sat on the counter, I would go by it and I would grab a bite. In fact, I would leave the fork on the plate with the cake so I could have a quick bite. So when I finally stopped the binge eating, I wouldn't be able to stay stopped, and the whole process would start over again, and it would be consuming. It's very consuming to start the whole process over. And that would sometimes motivate me not to have the slip because I knew how hard it was to get back to my balanced place. But that's not what the big book tells us. It states that our lives remain unmanageable even when our addiction is under control. This is why Bill broadcasts in step 10 that we are not cured. It's very important that people understand that we're not cured. We're never going to be cured. There are no steps to take to get to cured. And it distinguishes between physical powerlessness, the inability to stop, and emotional unmanageability, which refers to the chaos of navigating life even when we've found abstinence. This distinction is not merely a play on words from Bill. Once you grasp this concept, you will recognize the truth in Bill's message. The two aspects are interdependent. And Bill says, we are placed in a position of neutrality. We have entered the world of spirit, and we have commenced this way of living while we cleaned up our past. Although we are not cured, but we do have the daily reprieve. A daily reprieve from our addiction and from the obsessions. A daily break from body and mind playing off of each other. Our daily reprieve comes when we treat our unmanageability, the spiritual malady, with that spiritual shield that renders us invulnerable to the attack of the obsession and the delusions. And you all have likely become tired of hearing the word powerless. I know it gets old. So substitute a word or phrase that gives more bite from your point of view if you need to. Um, we do get stuck on words a lot in life, which we really shouldn't. But if you do, just swap it out. You could use the term no choice, which means that once I start using, I have no choice but to continue. And then, of course, once I stop on my own power, I will not stay stopped because I do not have the power to stay stopped on my own. And Bill viewed self-empowerment not not through the lens of self-reliance, but through surrender, humility, and service. Bill believed that true personal power is unlocked only when an individual accepts their limitations and relies on a power greater than themselves. Bill's philosophy is rooted in a fundamental paradox. You must first admit total defeat in order to win. Bill claimed that relying on sheer willpower and self-sufficiency ultimately leads to ruin. The self, or ego, is seen as the root problem, blinding individuals to their defects and cutting them off from others. By giving up control over all the unmanageable areas of our life, we gain a new kind of power. This spiritual This spiritual foundation replaces self-will with principles like honesty, tolerance, and unselfishness. And we're far from ordinary creatures. With our bodies, minds, and a dash of free will, we embody the essence of a human being. This incredible combination distinguishes us from the rest of the animal kingdom and serves as the key ingredient for embarking on step one. In fact, it's the enchanting recipe for all the steps, which we will explore together like a captivating mystery novel. So put on your detective hat because this perspective is how I delve into the complexities of mind, body, and the dynamics. So I followed the steps for quite some time. I truly grasped the meaning and their purpose. My addiction stemmed from two sources: my body, which manifests as cravings, and my mind, which generates obsessive thoughts prior to those cravings. However, I struggled to connect these two aspects due to my initial addiction to people. I struggled in making the information still make sense as an addiction. Although, through my understanding of the will, I eventually learned to differentiate between substance addictions and process addictions, particularly in relation to unmanageability. The process addictions, also known as behavioral addictions, are considerably distinct from substance addictions. Unlike substance addictions, which involve drugs, alcohol, food, process addictions revolve around specific behaviors or a collection of behaviors, such as gambling, or in my case, codependency. And then substances, alcohol, drugs, food, and processes, pretty much everything else. At the very least, addiction is all about brain mechanisms. While substance and process addictions activate the same brain reward pathways, The key difference lies in the source of the dopamine surge and the resulting physical dependence. Substance addiction involves introducing an external chemical, whereas process addiction is a response to a specific behavior. But both create similar neurochemical changes over time. So the person that's addicted to crack is not, so to speak, a worse addict than a person that's addicted to flowers, let's say. The type of addiction doesn't define the addict. So let's briefly review. We looked at the allergy and the doctor's opinion, where Dr. Silkworth stated that there is something wrong with our mind and also something wrong with our body. His focus was on the body problem, saying abstinence is the only solution. But today we're looking at the mind, and Bill, on page 23 to I think page 43, which we'll go over at some point, but do you remember the word insane in the big book? In the doctor's opinion, it has a special definition. You won't find in a dictionary, and Bill gives a fantastic rendition of it on page 37. Bill means unhealthy thinking. The big book is not talking about losing your touch with reality. It's not about that at all, or craziness or insanity, like somebody in an insane asylum. In Bill's terms, it means that we are subject to an obsession, which means our mind is being hijacked by a thought, and unfortunately, the thought or the content of the thought is delusional. The insanity Bill is talking about in the big book is about obsession and delusion. And that's it. I love this word, alkalogical thinking. What Bill means by the term unhealthy thinking is that we are comfortable with obsessional thinking or ruminating, which is thinking about the past. Our mind has been hijacked by a thought, and unfortunately, the thought or the content of the thought is delusional. But we don't know that we don't know, and we can't see that we don't see, and we are not aware that it is all just a big lie. And as addicts, every one of us here could be on a scale of 1 to 10 in severity. Some of us are severe and some of us are not as severe. It's all kind of subjective. And our fellow addicts might simply consider this as alkalogical thinking. I believe this is what Bill meant and what he was trying to get across to us when he said, sane means when an alcoholic can see and act on the truth in regards to their addiction. Insane means when an alcoholic or addict cannot see and acts on their obsessional and delusional truths. So delusion is a thought whose content is a lie, and it takes possession over us without our consciousness and without our consent. The most common example that we hear about in meetings is about insanity. Insanity can be defined as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That's the one I think everybody's heard. Stepping in a hole, getting up the next day, stepping in the same hole. How many times am I going to step in the hole? Our thoughts are obsessional. We really actually believe our own delusions and obsessions to be real and acceptable. We really do. And when we're trying to convince ourselves that it will be different, meaning better, it's a lie, it's a delusion. It comes out of all three of the people who contributed in a confluence back in the 1930s to the origination of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Dr. Silkworth, as the psychiatrist and the minister, Frank Buckman talked about using the 6-step process for the transformation, and the spiritual awakening, for the enlightenment, and the change in us that we have looked at in step 12. Bill wrote, I was in this anything but spiritual mood on the night when the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous was written. I was sore and tired clear through. I lay in bed at 182 Clinton Street with pencil in hand and with a tablet of scratch paper on my knee. I could not get my mind on the job, much less put my heart in it. But here was one of those things that had to be done. Slowly, my mind came into some kind of focus. Since Ebby's visit to me in the fall of 1934, we had gradually evolved what we called the word of mouth program. Most of the basic ideas had come from the Oxford groups, William James and Dr. Silkworth. Though subject to considerable variation, it all boiled down into a pretty consistent procedure, which comprised 6 steps. And these are the 6 steps, the original 6 steps. There's been, I think, 4 or 5 variations that came just before the big book. But this is what it started with, and this is what really got Bill thinking about writing a book and implementing these 6 steps, even though it went to 12. I like the first one. We admitted that we were licked, that we were powerless over alcohol. I love those old sayings. So yeah, those are the 6 original if you want to take a look at them. Now, Carl Jung was the first person to send somebody who had an alcohol addiction to find a spiritual experience. He was referring to Roland Hazard. Roland could not stop drinking no matter what he tried. He even spent one entire year with Dr. Jung, but returned to drinking anyways. And he was very upset when that happened, and he asked Jung, why he was not able to be successful. And Jung told him that his alcoholism was beyond the help of medical science, that his case was hopeless, that the only way he might conquer his disease was if he underwent a spiritual transformation, but that these were very rare. So Roland returned to the States and dedicated himself to the Oxford group and its spiritual principles. In August of 34, when he had been sober for some time, he accepted Ebby into his custody from the courts. Ebby also got sober, and in December of 34 went to visit his old friend Bill. And as Bill tells it, he had already received knowledge of the disease from Dr. William Silkworth, but it was from Ebby that Bill came to understand the vital spiritual component. That really was the key, and it opened up the whole egg for Bill. So to sum it up, the first step addresses the physical issue we face, often described as an allergy, and that triggers the phenomenon of craving. This addiction manifests as a compulsion, and the only effective solution is abstinence. On the mental side, we grapple with a defect in our thinking process. Our thoughts are frequently, if not always, distorted when evaluating events in our lives. And these cognitive distortions run rampant among addicts, leading us to become ensnared by obsessions, a falsehood we refuse to acknowledge as false. We have genuinely convinced ourselves that our lies are the truth. And the only way forward is to awaken to reality through a connection with a higher power that fosters healthy, rational thinking grounded in truth. So we awaken, as emphasized in the big book, by establishing a relationship with a power greater than ourselves. We awaken to the truth. And the crucial transition from ego-driven self-reliance to dependence on the higher power is a must-have to recover. Absolutely must-have. And this relationship often reveals itself after acknowledging that self-will has failed us and we find ourselves without solid ground to stand on. Any attempts to control one's life through self-will often results in chaos and unmanageable existence. By admitting powerlessness over addiction, as described in step 1, we unlocked the potential for a life of recovery with this newfound power in the driver's seat. So establishing a relationship with this power allows us to cultivate healthy, rational thinking grounded in reality, supported by common sense observations. They're awfully cute, aren't they? So Bill asserts that if the body were the issue, we would simply just stop. We have all experienced periods of stopping, whether it was for a weekend, a month, years, and we remember the outcomes of those attempts. Each of us has faced times before joining the program or even after where staying stopped just seemed impossible. Bill identifies not being able to stay stopped as the core problem. Maintaining sobriety demands continuous effort, and it's common for us to make progress, experience a setback with a relapse, and then continue moving forward. Step back, 2 steps forward. But what is it that drives us to start moving forward again? Why do we take that first addictive drink, that first sip? What makes a food addict take that first bite of the forbidden addictive food and not be able to stop? Why does a person with a gambling addiction or addiction to buying lottery tickets or calling a bookie or going to a casino, betting on football games, why can't they stop doing what they can't afford to do? Why does a relationship addict or a love addict or a sex addict engage in a flirty conversation, kissing and dancing others when they know they are in a committed relationship? Why don't they stop? Why can't they not do it? We may find ourselves consumed by thoughts of one day overcoming this battle, yet we often act against our desires and neglect what we truly want and know. I hold on to the belief that this time could be a different outcome, but ultimately, it makes little difference when the grip of addiction tightens around me. The obsession persists, leading me to think that somehow, someday, I'm going to conquer this game. I'm going to beat it. And additionally, there's a pervasive feeling that I'm somehow abnormal. And that drives us to trying any absurd treatment that comes our way. We try vitamins, minerals, food, classes, centers, whatever it takes. So we experiment with all those things, with therapy, religion, prayer, meditation, education, anything, everything in pursuit of relief. And Bill notes on page 24 that if you are a genuine alcoholic or addict, you have lost control. At some point, every alcoholic reaches a state where even the strongest desire to quit proves futile, making it impossible to stay stopped or to refrain once they start again. And as addicts, we lose our power of choice regarding our addiction of choice. We become powerless. Our inferior willpower diminishes significantly, making it difficult at times to recall the pain and humiliation we have experienced even a week ago, a month ago, or even just last night. And when I read that, it reminds me of being a woman and having a baby. And if somebody asks a woman right after she has a baby, you're going to have another one? No way, they're never going to have another baby. And we go blind to that statement. We forget that we say that, and before you know it, we're having another baby. It's that kind of blind spot. So after a length of time in abstinence, if you've relapsed or when you have relapsed in the past, what were you thinking 2 minutes or within 2 minutes before you relapsed? What were your thoughts or your feelings? What were you conscious of? What were you aware of? In your mind, you might answer with, I don't think I was even conscious of anything. I didn't think about it. But you had the consciousness of whatever it may have been, but you don't remember it, but it was there. During a relapse, there is an internal struggle between the desire to resume using and the desire to remain abstinent. That's that story of the two wolves fighting, which one's going to win. If I could think about it and think it through, I would surely find the power, because if I knew better, I would do better, right? Well, no, that's not true, because this is powerlessness and we have no choice. We have no power. How can we do better if we have no power? If there is anything that you can do with success, then you wouldn't be powerless. But you are powerless, so there is nothing you can do. It's a very hard pill to swallow. On page 23, Bill said, once the malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. So in order to embrace your journey of recovery, you have to truly absorb this message. You must embrace the reality that there is nothing you can do to force this recovery process. And while you can prepare yourself and set the stage for grace, even the big book acknowledges that you won't experience it until you complete your 9th step. Ultimately, we will arrive at what Bill refers to as a position of neutrality. At this point, we won't need to avoid the people, places, and things that we once viewed as triggers, because their influence over us will diminish compared to the early stages of our recovery. So we do get better at it with the recovery. The thought of spending our lives battling against our triggers can be very overwhelming. After all, we are likely to encounter situations involving our addictions, particularly if we engage in helping others achieve sobriety during our own recovery journey. We have to be aware of that when we're working with other people and they're struggling with their addiction. We need to make sure we don't get pulled into that. Bill explains, we are not fighting it, nor are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we have been placed in a position of neutrality. We're safe and protected. We haven't yet sworn off. Instead, our problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither arrogant nor afraid. That is our experience. That is how we respond as long as we maintain our spiritual well-being. So, there's a little nugget on page 24, nugget of wisdom, and there's this automatic defense mechanism in us that screams, don't touch the hot stove. So imagine the scene. Let's say you come to visit my house. It's your first time and you're curious and you're excited and you're looking around, and I'm whipping up some gourmet meal and we're lost in chatter, and oops, by mistake, you happen to lean on the counter right next to where my stove is busy cooking our lunch. And you don't notice until, yikes, too late, your hand brushes the sizzling burner. You give a startled yell like, oh my gosh, and a hasty retreat of your poor injured hand, run it under cold water. So fast forward to your next visit. Now you're going to come over again. We're going to do lunch again. And now you're a little more vigilant as far as inspecting and ensuring that the stove is either on or off and you don't go near it. And you make sure your limbs aren't dangling. And would you dare to even touch it again? No, you wouldn't touch it again because you've had your fiery baptism. This sizzling metaphor is spot on, and Bill loves discussing neutrality. It's a reminder not to tempt fate by foolishly thinking, well, this time the stove won't burn me. That's the sneaky rationalization of obsession and that little blind spot. It's where we say things and we think because we say it, it's the truth. And quite often it's not. And we might say, well, it won't hurt again. I learned my lesson, which highlights the blind spot, but the reasoning is utterly irrational and not believable to anyone thinking clearly. Bill also suggests that perhaps you don't even think about it at all. You are consumed by the denial. Bill says if these thoughts don't invade our minds to dissuade us, they are often vague and easily replaced by the outdated notion that we can manage ourselves just as everyone else does. So we just pretend it didn't happen. We're really good at that. And we are defenseless against the first drink or the first usage. So Bill says when this kind of thinking comes fully ingrained in someone with addictive tendencies, they have likely gone beyond human help and, unless confined, may face death or permanent insanity. And interestingly enough, this was something Bill overheard from Dr. Silkworth, who shared it with Lois in the hallway outside Bill's hospital room. He heard them talking to each other. But yet, despite this insight, Bill did relapse, in demonstrating that such information is often insufficient to prevent a relapse. Bill had the information, he knew what it would take, he relapsed anyways. So we ask again, what were you thinking? What were you aware of? What was your consciousness like before your relapse? In those moments, choice is gone. There is no choice. And awareness is really teeny tiny. This is the essence of powerlessness. There is no choice. There is no defense. Let this resonate with your soul. There is nothing you can do about it. So in this chapter, which is titled There is a Solution, Bill aims to counter the feelings of hopelessness and despair. He wishes to prevent the problem in a more positive light, offering us early glimmers of hope that a solution exists. And he acknowledges that many of us struggle with the introspective aspect of the solution, perhaps referring to the fourth step, which involves humility and admitting our shortcomings. This process can be challenging, as addiction once dictated our existence. It can be that equal and challenging. When, therefore, we were approached by those who had found a solution to the problem, there was nothing for us but to pick up the simple toolbox of spiritual tools that lay at our feet. We have experienced profound feelings akin to being in heaven, as we have been propelled into a fourth dimension of existence that we never imagined could be possible. Bill emphasizes the need for deep and transformative spiritual experiences that will completely change our perspective on life, our relationships with others, and our understanding of the universe. The central truth of our lives today is the unshakable certainty that our Creator has entered our hearts and resides within us in a truly miraculous way. Our Creator has begun to achieve for us those things we could have never accomplished on our own. So Bill explains that we're facing a critical decision point. If you're struggling with addiction, you're at a crossroads where there is no middle ground. To your left lies the path of addiction, shrouded in darkness, while to your right is the path of freedom, illuminated by light. You have two choices. One is to continue down the road of denial, avoiding the harsh reality of your unbearable situation, an option that many people will select either intentionally or by default. And it's truly disheartening, but honestly, statistically, less than 50% succeed in overcoming this challenge. And it may be even lower for those who veer off in the wrong direction. And your alternative choice is to embrace a spiritual path. I realize that I'm preaching to the choir as your presence here indicates your commitment. It's clear that you're all ready to put in the work. We all share the desire and willingness to learn, and each of us will take our own unique approach. There are no strict rules and no set timelines for finishing this work. In fact, we shouldn't even use the word finish in this work because there is no finish. But my suggestions are drawn from the big book along with my personal experiences and insights. And that comes from working closely with others in other healing practices also. So we each have to take our own unique approach. Just because the girl sitting next to us is doing better or the guy sitting next to us isn't doing as good doesn't mean that's going to affect our progress unless we let it. Everybody has their individual way of doing things, and that includes their recovery. So don't compare. So here's a tale of Roland Hazard. This is Roland here. In the early 1930s, long before he encountered Bill Wilson or even considered a recovery program, Roland Hazard was grappling with alcoholism and was desperately seeking a solution. He was a fairly wealthy man, and he was even able to travel to Switzerland to spend an entire year with Dr. Jung, hoping for some special recovery. And it's important to remember that Jung was the one who advised Roland to seek a spiritual experience. This journey led Roland to discover the Oxford group. Roland believed that by gaining expert insights and profound understanding of the hidden workings of his mind, Dr. Jung, he'd be fine. How could he fail when he was consulting the second best psychiatrist of his time in the world? He was second only to Freud. Freud was number one at the time. And interestingly enough, shortly after meeting with Jung, Roland experienced yet another relapse. He returned to Jung, pleading for the truth behind his relapse. The doctor's response was very blunt. He said to Roland, "You are utterly hopeless." That's right on page 26 if you want to read it, but he did. He told him it was useless. So Dr. Jung's evaluation was that unless Roland were to place himself under lock and key or hire a full-time bodyguard to defend him from his impulses, he would have no chance of surviving this. And Bill said, "This is a free man. He can go anywhere and do anything. He doesn't need to be confined, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude." But then says to Roland, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you." I mean, oh God, imagine that's a punch in the stomach. Terrible news. And Roland felt like the gates of hell had closed in on him with a bang. He was hopeless and helpless, and worse, he was powerless. On page 55, it says, "We can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, and encourages you to search diligently within yourself, then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you." And what Bill is saying is that through our dedicated practice of the steps, with an open mind and lots of honesty, the spiritual truth of a higher power will evolve into a deeply felt internal experience, a profound certainty and awareness that we can no longer dismiss. This journey involves a major shift from mere intellectual acceptance to a significant personal realization of a spiritual truth. a transformation that will alter your entire perception of life. It's like putting on a brand new pair of glasses. So on page 28, he writes, here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself during the extraordinary experience that made him a free man. We, in turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of a drowning man. This is another powerful metaphor. So I've shared this story before, and I'm going to share it again. I had a seemingly perfect marriage that fell apart after 30 years. I pleaded with my ex to help me understand what was happening and why it was. He literally came home one day and said, I'm leaving. And I said, when will you be back? And he said, never. He put stuff in a green bag and walked out. That was the extent of the conversation. But I needed to understand how that happens after 30 years. Wow. Who's going to pay the bills, that kind of stuff. And it felt desperate and utterly incapable of relying on myself, completely addicted to his presence, completely codependent. And after a year of trying to understand this marriage falling apart, he finally enlightened me with a metaphor. He said, I'll tell it to you this way. Imagine we're in a boat. We're both in it, and it's out in the middle of the ocean. And somehow it's taking on water. And only one person can remain in the boat to survive. So I threw you overboard. That's not quite the story I was expecting, but it came very crushingly, the way he told it. And I always think of it when I get to this part of the 12 steps. And I was so highly dysfunctional, codependent, and working on very minimal faith. The pain just lingered for a long time. And my addiction to him made me believe I would literally die if he left, no matter how awful he was. I couldn't do it. It's kind of like Stockholm syndrome. But as I began to reconnect with my spiritual self and my spiritual source, I started to reflect on his analogy, and I realized something I had previously overlooked about it. There was an alternate ending to this very cruel interpretation of our marriage's demise. And that was that he didn't throw me overboard. He was a addict with narcissistic tendencies and emotional and physical abuse. I mean, he had it all. Yet, through the support and the power of my creator, I took that metaphor and I finished it with, I swam to the shore and I landed on a beach that resembled paradise. And I am eternally grateful that he pushed me out of that boat. I was on a sinking ship anyways, and I would never have survived under his destructive influence if it continued. And I didn't have what it took to leave. I was too beaten down by decades of gaslighting and control tactics. So the metaphor is we can lose ourselves, we can fall into the hands of our destruction and our diseases and all of that, but we're not permanently lost. And life can actually be better after these events that we go through. It can be, I mean, my life is exponentially so much better, I can't even tell you. So this is addiction, and these were some of my chains that held me down. I had a lot of fear. I had relationship issues, food issues. I wanted to control people, places, and things. Outcomes for a long time. It was very painful. I felt like I was drowning in it all until I finally could see the truth. That intense desperation to move forward while feeling utterly stuck created a profound power struggle in me. And Bill describes it beautifully. He says, what seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given to us through a design for living, and it truly works. Bill emphasized that there are countless paths through which we can discover the power. He does caution, though, that we have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way to acquire faith, and that's very important. This means that all of us, regardless of our race, creed, color, age, we are all the children of a living creator with whom we can establish a relationship on simple, very simple and understandable terms as soon as we're willing. And we just have to be honest enough to try. There are no limitations that cannot be overcome through a creator who has neither a beginning nor an ending. There's nothing that's going to be bigger than that. So Bill provides us with a figurative roadmap outlining the organization of the book, offering us a valuable context to keep in mind. In the subsequent chapter titled More About Alcoholism, Bill delves deeper into the concept of alcoholism, emphasizing the themes of no choice and powerlessness. He presents this information not just for our understanding, but to ensure we have a genuine experience with the concept. We're encouraged to read it and then to live it. And as we further explore the chapter, we find clear guidance on how to achieve recovery. Bill says, in my analysis, the problem exists in both the body and the mind, but there is a solution. We have certainly made progress in our recovery, though we are not cured. Instead, we have been graced with the gift of abstinence. This gift has not been earned through the steps. Rather, we have embraced these steps out of a need to connect with a higher power. There is a profound relationship at play here. And through this connection to power, we actively engage with the steps. In doing so, we continually discover the power through our willingness and grace. So Bill states that each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. This is a poem that I'm going to read now. One night, I dreamed I was walking along the beach with the Creator. Many scenes from my life flashed across the sky. In each scene, I noticed footprints in the sand. Sometimes there were two sets of footprints. Other times there was only one set of footprints. This really bothered me because I noticed that during the low periods of my life, when I was suffering from anguish, sorrow, or defeat, I could see only one set of footprints. So I said to the Creator, you promised me that if I followed you, you would walk with me always. But I have noticed that during the most trying periods of my life, there have been only one set of footprints in the sand. Why, when I needed you most, you have not been there for me? The Creator replied, the times when you have seen only one set of footprints in the sand is when I was carrying you. That was written by Mary Stevenson. I love that. So many people come across this material during meetings, and it's clear that we often become desensitized to its effects. Take a moment to reflect. Are you truly convinced that you are addicted to something? This may sound like a strange question, but I recall my father, who stopped drinking after undergoing triple bypass at 64, remaining sober until his passing at the age of 88. Now, if you asked him whether he considered himself to be an alcoholic, he would have emphatically denied it. No amount of evidence, his destructive actions, excessive drinking, or encounters with family court could change his mind. He ultimately lived and died as an unrecovered alcoholic. A dry drunk is what they call it. It's so tragic that he never discovered the strength he needed, yet he continued to view his brain disorder merely as a moral issue. And when it comes to identifying as an addict, it's completely acceptable to say, not yet, or no, I'm definitely not, but bear with me. No one wants to feel different, either physically or mentally, from those around them. It's no surprise that our battles with addiction have been filled with countless unsuccessful attempts to prove that we could use addictive substances just like everybody else does. I find it ironic that, in my experience, addicts tend to draw each other in. Yet we still desire to be seen as free from stigma, whether among fellow addicts or those who are not. However, I can't help but wonder if they were willing to take a closer look, would they might have realized that they are all struggling with their own forms of dysfunction. So we have delusions and we have illusions and self-delusional. And we use these words to describe the psychological and spiritual blind spot, the addict's fundamental inability to see the reality of their addiction, most notably, the false belief that they will one day be able to control their drinking. It's not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, we will control and enjoy this drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. And Bill addresses a prevalent delusion. But first, we need to know what distinguishes an illusion from a delusion. So, illusion refers to a false, deceptive, or misleading image, idea, perception, it's a misperception of sensory information or misguided beliefs. And illusions can involve any of the senses, such as optical illusions, auditory illusions, and false beliefs. Whereas delusions are fixed false beliefs that contradict reality. When someone is in a delusional state, they cannot let go of their incorrect convictions, even when presented with evidence to the contrary. Delusions are often fueled by misinterpretations of events. Bill emphasizes the persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were addicts. This is the first step in recovery. What is an obsession? An obsession is a thought, and not all thoughts are obsessions. An obsessive thought is a persistent, unwanted, and intrusive thought, image, or urge related to substance or process use, a past high, or the idea of using again. Obsession takes possession of us without our permission and without our realization. This is what is meant by no choice. A normal thought is usually fleeting and doesn't cause significant distress or disruption. Thoughts appear and disappear without much impact on our daily lives. You can generally let go of normal worries or doubts without them consuming you. They don't lead to repetitive behaviors or mental acts to reduce the related anxiety. Obsessive thoughts are unwanted, unexpected, and impulsive. They repeatedly enter your mind, making them difficult, nearly impossible to control or dismiss, and create intense anxiety, fear, and doubt. The delusion that we are like other people has to be thrown out, which is reminiscent of what Bill said, simple but not easy, a price had to be paid. It means the destruction of self-centeredness, which is very relevant in unmanageability because that is the nature of unmanageability. It is selfishness and self-centeredness. And Bill says it was simple but not easy. The price had to be paid. I must turn in all things to the Father of the light who presides over us all. It's one of my favorite quotes. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory, followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. Turning towards the light in all aspects of life signifies a shift away from darkness towards the Father of light. This initial transition occurs in step 2, where we acknowledge the existence of light with a capital L. And in step 3, I commit to turning towards that light of the Spirit and moving away from the darkness of my unmanageability. As people grappling with addiction, we have lost the ability to control our impulses. In truth, we possess very little, if any, control over anything. Well, have you all heard the story before about the cucumber that transforms into a pickle? Well, you're in for a treat. So Mr. Cucumber takes a vacation at the Brine all-inclusive resort. He eats whatever he wants and drinks like a fish. He is enjoying this relaxing, soothing feeling so much that he decides to stay another week and tells his boss and family that he has extended his time to stay there. He notices, after being at the resort, that he is softening up and changing color a little bit. It never occurs to Dale that it is probably from being in the brine too much. When guilt comes along, he thinks to himself, I never treat myself and I work hard. I deserve this and more. So he upgrades on a maxed out credit card to a better room with more brine amenities. Time flies at the brine resort, and Dale actually says to himself, where did the time go? It somehow seems like a blur. It must be those delicious brine drinks making me forgetful. His reservation is due to end, and he decides it is still not enough. He wants more, even with the awful effects to his insides and outsides, but he's out on vacation time. So he quits his job to stay at the brine resort. He convinces himself that it will be great and he deserves to be pampered for a change. Over time, the brine atmosphere permeates Mr. Cucumber completely, and it eventually takes over Mr. Cucumber's body, mind, and spirit. He's completely cooked. Soon after, it's time for him to leave the brine resort. And Mr. Pickle realizes that he has had a complete and unchangeable chemistry metamorphosis. He is doomed to live his life as a brine addict, and there is no changing back. The chemical event has changed his body's chemistry. Once you're a cucumber and you change to a pickle, you cannot go back to being a cucumber. So once his resources ran out, they kicked Mr. Pickles to the curb, where he is placed on a plane to go home. On the ride home, he obsesses over not being able to be restored back to the cucumber. The moral of the story: once you become an addict, you will always be an addict. We have no choice over that. Bill says, as we look back, we feel we had gone on using many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. And a true addict in an advanced stage of addiction has scant chance of success. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay sober or clean anything like a year. What sort of thinking dominates an addict who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of that first hit? A state of profound delusion and a strange mental blank spot dominate an addict's mind right before they indulge. When the critical moment arrives, the memory of the misery, the ruined relationships, and the physical consequences vanishes from our active decision-making process. The brain fails to supply an effective mental defense against taking that first hit. The psychological drive focuses entirely on the anticipation of relief or pleasure, completely overshadowing the reality of what actually follows substance use. And despite having suffered devastating consequences, the individual is overcome by the irrational, obsessive belief that this time will be different because they believe wrongly that they can control it and they will only experience the positive effects. And the desperate experiment of the first drink, the first bet, the first bite, whatever it is, why do we choose it? What must we be thinking? So let's look at Jim and his story. Jim is the car salesman who put a little whiskey in his milk and has a lucrative life, kids, an inherited car dealership, which is amazing considering the automobile has basically just been invented. But Jim is a good salesman. People like him. He's smart, intelligent. He has a nervous disposition and a little bit fear-based, but he didn't even start drinking till he's 35. But in a few short years' time, he becomes violent when intoxicated and ends up in an insane asylum. Jim ends up losing his business but begins working for the company. And it all went well for a time until it didn't, because Jim didn't enlarge his spiritual life. And so he finds himself drunk on half a dozen times in rapid succession. At the bottom of page 14, it says, if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. We might speculate that Jim's failure stemmed from finishing his steps without realizing he wasn't truly cured. He had a spiritual malady that required daily maintenance based on steps 10, 11, and 12. His rapid relapse indicated a lack of resistance, yet when Bill and Bob worked with him again, they chose not to judge or reject him. They didn't say, come back when you want it badly enough. Instead, they simply supported him, which is the core principle. Jim acknowledges that he is a genuine alcoholic, as stated in step 1, and recognizes the serious nature of his condition. He understands that he would lose everything if he drank again. In disbelief, his peers ask him to share his story. He recounts, I arrived at work on Tuesday, feeling frustrated about having to sell for a business I once owned. After a brief exchange with my boss, nothing serious, I decided to take a drive into the countryside. I got hungry and stopped at a favorite cafe known for its great food without even considering drinking. I sat down, ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk, still free from thoughts of alcohol. Then I ordered another sandwich and opted for another glass of milk. Suddenly, the thought struck me to add an ounce of whiskey to my milk, convincing myself that it wouldn't hurt on a full stomach. Despite being aware of the steps I had taken to achieve freedom, I found myself ordering a whiskey and pouring it into the milk. It felt gross, and I vaguely sensed that I wasn't making a wise choice. Yet my intuition couldn't overcome my desire. I thought I felt reassured because I was taking the whiskey with food in my stomach. And therein lies the delusion. Can you see the obsession and the false belief? He had an inkling of awareness, but it was overshadowed. He believed that the food would make a difference, which is the lie. All his knowledge, the effort he had put into the steps, and all his fears were brushed aside in favor of the irrational notion that he could safely drink if he mixed it with milk. This insane idea triumphed. The next day, we would sincerely ask ourselves how it could have happened. Bill would refer to this as sheer insanity, but he would clarify it by posing the question, how can such a lack of proportionality in the ability to think clearly be termed anything else? He states our reasoning failed to keep us in check. Ultimately, the breakdown of reasoning in addiction is a multifaceted issue in which the intense, immediate urge for reward and relief eclipses the brain's diminished capacity for thoughtful, rational decision making. When we begin to use substances or processes, again, intentionally rather than casually, there is minimal effective thought during the pre-meditation phase regarding the dreadful consequences that may follow. This highlights the critical importance of the moments leading up to a relapse. During the time of premeditation, there is often little effective thought about what was going through your mind just before you chose to use again. So on page 38, Bill asks in regards to the jaywalking example, our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? But think about it. This is not about intelligence. It's about a vicarious thrill. Bill says the man gets a thrill out of skipping in front of the fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he gets slightly injured several times. This conduct continues along with his promises to keep off the streets altogether. Eventually, he loses everything and he tries extreme measures to get the jaywalking out of his head. Repeatedly being seriously injured still isn't enough to make him stop the craziness. Bill says, however intelligent we may have been in other respects, where addiction has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? I found after reading this chapter and applying it to the addicts in my life that I no longer nail them to the cross. I used to be very hard on addicts who behaved outrageously and just weren't getting it. I understand the blind spot in myself, having experienced it firsthand, but until I really understood this chapter, it was difficult to give them the grace that they deserved. So Bill shares a second story, just in case the first one doesn't resonate with you. This story revolves around Fred, the accountant at a well-known firm. He's educated, successful, personable. And Bill and Bob met Fred in a hospital when they were searching for individuals to work with alcoholism. And Fred convinced himself that he was in the hospital merely for a rest. And he felt disheartened about his situation and decided to quit drinking. However, it never crossed Fred's mind that he might not be able to quit, as he believed his character and reputation were his greatest assets. He acknowledges having some symptoms. He refuses to accept a spiritual solution. He clings to the belief that self-awareness will solve his problems. He wants to fix it on his own. After some time, they hear about Fred again, who has returned to the hospital. He appears shaky and anxious to meet with Bill. And Fred confides, I was convinced that this couldn't happen to me after all I had learned. I thought I was not as far gone as many of you, since I had generally succeeded in overcoming my other personal challenges, and I believed I would succeed where others had failed. I felt justified in my self-confidence, thinking it was merely a matter of exercising my willpower and staying vigilant. And how many addicts have thought those exact same words? Probably almost all. So what happened to Fred's sobriety? Well, Fred told Bill and Bob that after arriving at the hotel, he took time getting ready for dinner, and as he entered the dining room, a thought crossed his mind that having a couple of cocktails with his meal would be really enjoyable. That was all, nothing more. He wasn't going to make it worse. And that's where the lies and the deception are. That's the delusion. So he orders a cocktail along with his meal, followed by another. After dinner, he went for a walk. When he returned to the hotel, the idea of a highball became appealing. He stepped into the bar and had one, which led him to several more that night, and quite a few more the following morning. When he landed in New York, he got into a cab and the driver took him around for several days. He couldn't recall where he had been, what he had said, or what he had done. Eventually, he found himself back in the hospital, suffering immensely. Once he regained some mental clarity, he reflected on that night in Washington. He remembered feeling unguarded and not resisting the first drink at all. He had no consideration for the consequences and drank as if the alcohol were simply ginger ale. He concluded that he possessed the alcoholic mind, realizing that willpower and self-awareness were no match for those peculiar mental gaps. So mind power may allow me to maintain control for a few hours or even days, during which I can follow through on my decisions. However, eventually I encounter that peculiar mental blank spot that we just talked about, and my determination feels as slippery as it can be. In a simplified view of the brain, we'd like to believe that our conscious mind governs our actions primarily through the frontal lobe of the cerebral cortex, where our thoughts and decisions reside. Yet lurking in the depths of our mind is the amygdala. It's the primitive part that fuels fundamental survival in the instincts such as fear and anger. And here's how it works. You're determined not to use today. You've resolved that it's simply off the table. Instead, you plan to consume healthy drinks, perhaps exercise, keep yourself busy during the day. But then suddenly, the thought of having a drink creeps in. A drink sounds delightful. Why not? Unwind with one or two. You're aware that this thought contradicts your intentions, but you had decided against it. But the reasons for that decision feel elusive now. Meanwhile, your amygdala presents a tantalizing, visually striking image of your favorite drink taunting you, saying, "What are you, weak? Just indulge in what you want. Just have one. You'll be fine." And this thought process seems entirely logical. Seems like why would my brain do that unless it's not true? The notion of abstaining appears absurdly unrealistic, while the thought of drinking feels instantly familiar and reasonable. Consequently, you decide yes. In an instant, the decision is made, and the genie is released once more, steering your life. We learn that we had to concede to our innermost self. This is the first step in recovery. On page 42, Bill recounts how two members of AA who visited in the hospital with Fred outlined the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them followed successfully. Fred admits he had only been a nominal churchgoer and found their suggestions intellectually easy to accept, though he considered the program of action sensible yet quite drastic. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out of the window. Fred mentions he experienced a strange sense of relief regarding his addiction, which ultimately proved to be true. He also noted equally important was the realization that spiritual principles would resolve all my problems. I have since embraced a way of living that is infinitely more satisfying and, I hope, more beneficial than the life I led before. I would not return to it even if I could. In most cases, there is virtually no other solution. Once again, the alcoholic at certain times lacks an effective mental defense against the first drink, except in a few rare instances, neither he nor any other person can provide such a defense. His protection must come from a higher power. This wraps up the first half of the first step. In simple terms, when I begin, I cannot stop. And when I do stop, I cannot remain stopped. When I find myself unable to stop, there is a biological compulsion within my brain. When I manage to stop, I can't stay stopped due to a psychological obsession that will seize control of me without my awareness or consent, often at the most extreme level. After a length of time in abstinence, if you relapsed or when you have relapsed in the past, what were you thinking 2 minutes or within 2 minutes before you relapsed? What were your thoughts, your feelings? What were you conscious of? What were you aware of? And of course, your answer might be, I wasn't conscious of anything, but you had the consciousness of whatever it may have been. You just don't remember it, but you did have it. So that is the conclusion of the PowerPoint. But I would like to go over some of those questions in the second to last picture there. Hold on. So the questions are, can anybody recall those few couple of minutes before they relapsed? Does anybody have an experience they could share? It's probably hard to remember because it so easily hijacks us, but does anybody have anything? The my best ones are around my food addiction. I would think about like if some kind of food came in the house that I don't keep in the house, I would obsess over that piece of food, whether it was in my fridge, my cabinet, my hidden food spot. I would have to eat it just to stop the obsessive thoughts, just to control that uncomfortableness that I would be experiencing about that stupid piece of food. And sometimes I would go throw it out just so I would stop thinking about it. And I'd have to throw it out somehow where I couldn't go back and get it. So for me, that blind spot is 100% blind in me. The thought comes in, it seems okay, it seems reasonable. What's the big deal? Have a slice of cake. Don't eat the whole thing. I'm not thinking, oh, but I'm going to eat the whole thing. I'm thinking I'm going to eat a slice. I'm going to have a bite. I don't think how I'm going to overindulge. So when that blank spot covers up the question in my mind, should I go eat such and such? It's kind of a lie because I'm telling myself I'm going to go have a bite of cake or a piece of cake. But I know I'm going to eat that whole damn cake till it's finally gone. No matter how much I beg other people to eat it or take it, I can't throw it out. I've never been able to throw food out. I have other people do it. So for me, that's the blind spot. I think I'm going to eat one bite. I totally fool myself into believing I can have one bite of that.
Yeah. Well, it took me a while to think about this, but 15 years ago when I first came into program and I was sitting in the rooms, I didn't have a sponsor, but I was trying to do this on my own. And what happened was I would be on a plan where I was no flour, no sugar, although I didn't have the official food plan from a sponsor. And what happened was, okay, the first holiday that came along after I started going to meetings in February was, say, my anniversary. and then it was Easter or Mother's Day. Anyway, there was 3 holidays that came in, and I think that's what, these are food holidays, and I had um, no controls over me because I didn't have a sponsor yet. And so that's when I would go off and just, blow everything. And it was just like that whole diet mentality, like, okay, I can do this now, but then I'll just get right back on it tomorrow or Monday or whatever. And that was my thinking. And it wasn't a lot of thinking. There was, like you say, it wasn't like I really thought about it. The thing is that it was always regretful afterwards. But when I did finally get a sponsor, and pretty much, step 3 was turn everything over to my sponsor, right? It was, okay, she's in charge now. Not my life, but my food, which was the big problem, the main problem. But I do remember when the first, I was in program for a while, and then, you know, I, I just remember when I first realized, okay, I got a food thought. I got this food thought in my head. And, but then I thought, for the first time, I realized that I was thinking ahead to the consequences of that food bite. And it was like an aha moment, you know. I can remember it. It was the first time I ever had really stopped and thought about the consequences. So I didn't do it, because I had this outside of myself power or authority that was saying, that's a break. You would blow it. And, but, I did have, a few breaks when I started out because it just took a while to get used to this whole regimen, and I still rebel, it's just like, uh, do I have to, do I have to have approval for every item, not every item, but
Yeah, the food program is one of the more difficult ones, I believe, because we have to eat every day.
hmm
We have to take the tiger out of the cage, and we have to be able to handle it. And it sometimes it doesn't even matter what the food is. The overeating will ensue no matter what. So like you said, there's food holidays even, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, it's all about the food. And when you stop indulging in those food behaviors, you start wondering what really goes on during the holidays if you're not drinking and eating.
well,
You
I
know, it,
found out,
yeah, it's
because there's so many holidays these last 15 years, but
yeah,
yeah, it's,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I had a
And
thought, but it's gone. So,
yeah, so yeah, the food thing is it's a hard one. I think another example when you think about the 2 minutes before the relapse is when you get into the relationship stuff.
mhm,
Um, because I think that 2 minutes before a relapse with a relationship issue, it's not really happening 2 minutes. Usually a couple hours before somebody's
mhm,
coming home late or, the whole thing starts, the whole process. So yeah, it's a little bit harder listening to what are the 2 minutes before,
mhm,
2 minutes before you drive to the store and you're going to buy $100 worth of lottery tickets because you're hooked. You got to get in the car, you got to go drive, and you got to go purchase them. So that 2 minutes is that 2 minutes before you get in the car.
mhm,
With the food, I think it's more than 2 minutes. I can think about a candy bar in the freezer for a week. I can put it off for a whole week,
mhm.
but eventually I can't at some point. I can get
Well, I
stronger in
was
putting it off, but it's still going to come.
I was struggling with this food item that I've been eating for 6 months, and I got the idea from one of the people that I sponsor, and so, but it was bothering me, to do this, and so finally this morning when I was in quiet time, and it was like 1 second before I was on the phone with my sponsor, and God said, "Quit eating it."
Oh,
Oh, it's gone. Don't eat it anymore. That'll solve your problem.
that's fantastic. That's
I
fantastic.
know. I, yeah.
You know,
Anyway.
I think too when we're thinking about the time prior to using, um, some of it is the delusional stuff. When my father passed away, I went to go clean out food in his kitchen. My mother was still alive, but she didn't eat the same food that my father did. And he had boxes of Pop Tarts, which I never even ate. I was like, my elderly father was living on Pop Tarts. And my mother was like, well, take them home with you. And I'm like, no, I don't even eat them, right? I don't even eat them,
I don't even toast them.
right?
Yeah,
I
you
don't have
eat them right,
time.
right out of the
Yeah,
bag.
right, exactly. So I decide I'm going to try one.
Hmm.
And I was eating them all day long,
Hmm.
every day for 1 year,
Oh my
one
gosh.
whole year.
Mhm.
And I told myself it was okay because I was honoring my father.
Mhm.
I actually believed it was okay because I was saying, well, dad, this makes me feel closer to my dad. This is what
Mhm.
my dad did, blah, blah, blah. I actually fell for that. And that after that whole year, it was a whole year. I haven't eaten a Pop Tart since. I can never eat a Pop Tart again.
Yeah.
It was this crazy, bizarre food thing that happened.
Mhm.
Um, And what's amazing is I went into it not even caring what they were or wanting to even try one. And before I knew it, I couldn't stop eating them.
Yeah, that's the
Terrible.
obsession, I think. Yeah.
That's the obsession and the
Hmm.
delusion.
The
I,
delusion. Yeah.
I can eat Pop Tarts for breakfast and dinner, or lunch and breakfast, or every snack I don't need.
Hmm.
I just started believing my own insanity. Like Bill says, that insanity of I'm going to do this and
Well,
it's
I think
going to be
with
okay.
me, it really was a sensitivity to sugar
Yeah.
and flour. I mean, it was just really, and to the behaviors were like sneaking food,
Yeah. Yeah.
you had to sneak it because
Oh
I
yeah,
wanted
nobody
to.
knew I was eating Pop Tarts. They were hidden. I had them hidden really well.
Mm.
Yeah, I made sure nobody knew I was eating the Pop Tarts. It was crazy. But
Jeez.
that's the power of the illusion, the delusions, the stories we tell ourselves,
Hmm.
and how powerful. Oh, well, my dad died and these were his, and now I love them because he loved them. And wow, you know, we can really buy into some crazy crap.
Hmm.
Very crazy crap.
Can I say something, Lisa?
Absolutely. Do you want
Wow,
me to go ahead?
glad you shared that because I'm not a food addict and it just showed me but I mean, I can make the exact same insane excuses.
Exactly.
Helps to hear yours because
Yeah.
what a load of crock. How could you come up with that? That is ridiculous, right?
Right.
Honoring my father by eating Pop Tarts now, you know,
It's funny now.
I do the same analogous thing with
Yeah.
whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And so now that I have that, I mean, it's like having the wonderful concrete examples of Jim, the jaywalker, Fred.
Yeah.
Now I have Lisa with the Pop Tarts
I
because
know.
I have this, exact same bizarre, the same excuses for using my different drugs of choice.
Exactly. And the amazing part is that didn't end my life of addiction by eliminating the Pop Tarts. I found a great replacement in something else. That's the wonderful part of being addicted. You can always find a wonderful replacement when the Pop Tarts run out. Um, it's sad, but it's true. And I don't remember what I replaced with it. I ran my gamut with food addiction and then I went into some other addictions.
And
'Cause
like Herb always mentions the whack-a-mole,
yes,
you know,
yes,
and I've seen it in myself, when I
yeah,
gave up physical, visible things,
yeah,
started reaching for intangibles,
right.
you know,
Yeah,
like
because it's not about the
meals.
particular addictive substance or process. It's the fact that we need the addiction to cover up something that we're not capable of bringing to the front. So if we give up an addiction, but we haven't figured out that we're still suffering, then we're going to find another addiction until we find our higher power.
Yeah.
And that's what finally stops the transference of adding a new addiction when you've uncovered an old one. When you
Mhm.
finally have that spiritual awakening and you say, this is how I'm living my life now, and I'm doing it 100%, the addiction stuff just it doesn't show up. You don't need it.
Yeah, you find you don't have the need, so
Yeah,
you just don't even go there.
it becomes a natural process. It's I guess how other people live life. All
Oh,
the normal people.
when the Pop Tarts run out, and
Yes.
say you've had your spiritual awakening, you don't
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And
know.
I don't know if I've ever told that story before. I don't know. It's something Anita said made me think of it. Um,
Yeah, so when the Pop Tarts run out, like, and you've had your spiritual awakening, there's just no need, and you're not looking for the next thing. It's like
exactly.
you're satisfied.
Yep.
There's nothing, yeah. Mm.
Yeah, and I thought for a long time it was, well, I have a sugar problem and I got off sugar and I started using sugar free and had just
Oh,
as much as a problem as I did with sugar.
exactly.
So it's that I needed a substance and Pop Tarts were one and there's so many others, but eventually I don't need those because I've found the piece that fits in the hole in my soul and I don't have to fill it up anymore with all the other crap that didn't really matter. But I did enjoy the Pop Tarts until I got on the scale,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. It's chasing a thrill. I mean, it does say, I think in the
Yeah.
big book, we're addicted to excitement.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Nobody's addicted to banging their head against the wall for no reason. So it's all good. It all starts out good. Even if you think about an alcoholic, that first drink is like, wow, I feel this is great. It is at first. But like anything else, that substance takes over your life. Like the Pop Tarts, that whole year, it was about eating Pop Tarts. A whole year of my life.
And it made total sense to you to do it. It
It
was
did.
natural.
That's the amazing part. I thought I was doing this great thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's all right that I'm
Yeah.
doing this.
Yeah.
All right that I'm doing this because blah. Well,
Exactly.
I know that I don't really want to be doing this, but it's all right to do this. And
No,
this,
but you know what? I really wanted to do it. I never didn't want to do it. I
mm.
always wanted to do it. Every time I ate them, I wanted to eat them. I didn't want to deal with it after I ate them, but in the process of eating them, I did enjoy it. And then the remorse and the guilt would kick in. And that's a whole other ball of wax that you have to deal with. And it's not fun to live that way either.
Yeah, you said you end up living in a power struggle with
Yeah.
yourself.
Yep. Yep. It just became too much. Food should be nourishment, not distress, but it can become that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I guess the what I was getting is mostly I think you're sort of like asking about like the answers to the mind. I had to like translate it. Um And in my situation, I'm dealing with a process addiction. I mean, I can identify in terms of some of the other addictions people were talking about, but just like the previous assignment, my situation in this addiction very, very different, because it's under earning, and it's really not like any other addiction, really. It's not one of those things in my experience that I've met people who've mastered it, but not an overnight kind of thing. Uh,
Right.
and and I can't really so like when I answer these questions, or even like it was kind of interesting. Like I had a lot of profound actually God shots today, this morning. I had like a bunch of God shots, really huge stuff in many different areas that was kind of interesting, and it all kind of like lines up to a certain extent around one, two, and three.
Mm.
But some of the stuff like I came up with is that like I can remember, for example, in December 2024, I did some two-way prayer, and I got real clarity on how much I would need, and how much I would need to take care of a lot of my obligations. And it was really clear it was from God. And then I had somebody that wasn't God, like somebody with two legs, and they were saying something comparable when I did a fifth step with them. And so I had all that clarity on like really what I should be earning, what kind of jobs or stuff that I should be doing in business. And within 60 to 90 days, it was like I had none of those conversations. And I'm saying this to kind of identify in, because the process is a little bit different, but literally like I knew what to do, and probably exactly like the guy sitting there with the whiskey and milk, like it just like completely forgot about it, and was acting out on what, unlike like a lot of addictions, it's really not an SEXY kind of addiction, really kind of low vibration kind of thing, that is still addictive. It's still very, very, very addictive, because I've been doing it for like 30 some odd years. But so that was one of the interesting things that I saw like around that, like doing the assignment. And then I also like I have one kind of like uh I have one, I guess technically I have several small side businesses. And I had one thing I was really supposed to launch in 2025, and I didn't launch it in 2025. I didn't launch it because I just was afraid of, and people would keep telling me like, why don't you launch it? Why don't you launch? I launched it this year, but it was like a year later, you know what I mean? Like, and it was more of that kind of like I and I had like people in my recovery circle say over and over again, just a little bit. Why don't you just do it a little bit? Nothing for like a solid, like almost a solid year. And like I have one collaborator I work with, and like he has the results from having released like last year. And then in my mind, I'm like, why does he have those results? But I, being like in my addiction, and I have to be careful. Like I'm just like, though I'm talking the way I'm talking to identify him, because I have had progress, but it's totally different. It's just sort of like kind of incremental. And then another thing I was thinking about when I was talking is like, even though currently like I lost my like my day job in February, I see that while that would have been good to have a day job, that I can see from the process, from the addictive patterns, I still, when I had my day job, was still actually really suffering. So I didn't have some of the issues that I have now, but I was still locked in, because I still wasn't making ends meet totally. And I still, and so like the clarity is just getting deeper and deeper. And then I think the other kind of things to wind it down a little bit is like I saw that I think probably important to talk about, like one of the profound like God shots that I actually had today, probably tied to our work, is like I I did a service commitment, And I got more from doing the service commitment than my own step work, which was really profound because I had all these newer people asking me all these questions, like even last night and then this morning when I was doing the service commitment. And then in my life, I was able to do things in two sectors of my businesses that I hadn't been able to do in months. Like I had one thing that the solution just kind of came to me from like God, and it was total God shot, but I knew it was spiritual because like just looking up the information online, there was no solution, and then there was a solution, and then that happened like twice, and then I'll wrap it up. I had this one place that I would always need to show up and have these like pretty much upsetting conversations online. And I showed up there today and I was sitting there and we were having a, like really kind of heightened conversation where I could get excited. And I was sitting there and I was like, you know what? I'm really out of place. And this is not necessarily in line with God's will. And it was like God had removed the desire to be around these people. And like he removed it while I was around them, he removed the need to be around them. And I had to get from around these people. And it was just total. So it's like a coalescing of a lot of different stuff. I'll leave it there.
That's fantastic. You really have a lot of assistance. I'm jealous. Thanks for sharing, Mark. All right. Would anyone else like to comment on that? Nope. Okay. Well, then, if that's everything, I'm going to go ahead and do the serenity prayer. If anyone wants to join in, they certainly can. Thank you, everyone, for your shares. I really appreciate hearing from everybody. It reminds me of my stories, like Anita did for me. All right. God, please grant us the serenity to accept the
The
things
things
we
we
cannot
cannot
change,
change.
the courage to
Courage to
change
change the
the
things
things
we
we
can.
can, and the wisdom
Wisdom to know the
know the
difference.
difference. Keep
Thank
coming
you.
back. Very
Thank you,
good.
Lisa.
Thank you, everyone.